All right, welcome back, everybody. We're diving into something, kind of different today. We're looking at the Kingdom of David.
Yeah, a kingdom, right, like in the 21st century.
Exactly. You'd think that's, ancient history. But this group is proposing just that, a modern-day monarchy. And get this,
It gets wilder.
they're not just talking about one nation. No, they're thinking global empire.
Wow.
So we've got their website, articles comparing different types of government, even some glimpses into their vision for this worldwide empire. It's a lot.
It's fascinating how they're taking this concept of a kingdom, something we usually associate with like medieval times.
Right, crowns, knights, the whole deal.
And they're saying, hey, this is the solution for the future. They actually argue that monarchies are inherently more stable and effective than democracies.
Yeah, right off the bat, they hit you with this lifelong tenure thing for the monarch.
Which, they say allows for long-term planning, avoids that constant, political back and forth we see in democracies.
But does that really hold up? I mean, democracies have systems for continuity too, don't they?
Well, they argue that those systems, they get bogged down, like gridlock, short-term thinking, you know the deal.
I guess I can see that. Every election cycle, it feels like everything's up in the air.
Exactly. They're like, think about how often policies get completely reversed with each new administration in a democracy. A monarch, though,
No elections, no worries.
freed from that pressure of re-election, they could focus on the long game, right? Like massive infrastructure projects that span generations.
So basically, their argument is ditch the ballot box, put a king in charge, and things will get done.
Pretty much. And, to be fair, they point to historical examples of monarchies that pulled off these impressive long-term strategies.
Like what? Give me an example.
Think Roman Empire, the aqueducts, or the Great Wall of China, massive undertakings, right? They say these projects, they might never have happened with constantly changing leadership.
I see their point. But isn't there a huge risk in putting that much power in one person's hands?
It's the classic debate.
Even with the best intentions, couldn't a monarch make decisions that, aren't in everyone's best interest?
Oh, absolutely. That's the age-old question about monarchies, isn't it? And they kind of try to address this by emphasizing the cultural role of the monarch, the symbolism.
Okay, so pomp and circumstance.
A bit of that, yeah. They put a lot of weight on Jerusalem, for example, and use a red hexagram with a black upward pointing hand as their symbol. It's like they're trying to tap into this shared history, this identity to build unity.
Smart. Using those deep-rooted symbols, traditions, that's powerful stuff. But they also claim that monarchs are, uniquely qualified to lead because of how they're raised and trained. Does that really hold water today?
Well, it's a bit of a mixed bag, historically speaking.
Right.
You've got monarchs who are brilliant, like strategists, patrons of the arts and sciences.
The good ones.
Exactly. But then you've got the, shall we say, less competent ones.
The ones who maybe shouldn't have been in charge.
Right. But the Kingdom of David, they're saying, their monarch, they'd be meticulously trained in governance, diplomacy, economics, the whole 9 yards. They're painting this picture of a leader who's both wise and benevolent.
It sounds good on paper, but even with all that training, isn't there still a risk of, bias or just plain human error?
Of course.
And what about democracy itself? They're not completely anti-democracy, are they?
Surprisingly, no. They do give some props to democracy. They like the ideals, individual liberty, citizen participation.
Okay, so what's the problem then?
They argue that in practice, democracies, they often fall short of those ideals.
So where does that leave us? Are they saying democracy is doomed?
Not explicitly, no. They seem more focused on pointing out what they see as democracies, like flaws.
Okay, flaws. So what are they?
Things like the tyranny of the majority, where minority groups can get overlooked. And they talk about the influence of special interest groups, saying those are inherent flaws in democracies.
So it's not just about, efficiency. It's about whether democracies can actually protect individual rights and be fair to everyone.
That seems to be their core argument.
Right.
And they also bring up voter apathy and political polarization, saying those are, inevitable in democracies.
Pretty grim picture they're painting.
It is. But it's not like they're saying democracies are destined to collapse. They're more highlighting the challenges, and they believe those challenges are getting tougher.
I can't argue with that. We see these issues every day.
Exactly. It's not just theory. And here's where things get really interesting. They don't stop at critiquing democracies. They propose an alternative.
What's that?
A global empire.
Hold on. A global empire, like one giant kingdom ruling the entire world.
That's what they're suggesting. They call it an empire of aligned nations, and they make it clear that this empire would be based on human rights, mutual respect, equality.
Okay, slow down. How do they think this would actually work? Getting all the different countries with all their cultures and history to just align.
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. And to be honest, they don't really get into the specifics of how this alignment would happen.
That's convenient.
Right. But they do talk about the benefits, peace, obviously, economic prosperity, a stronger voice for the whole world on, well, everything.
World peace, everyone thriving.
Yeah.
It's almost too good to be true.
Right. And realistically, there'd be huge hurdles. Cultural differences, economic disparities, old conflicts. The list goes on. It's easy to see this grand vision getting lost in the messiness of global politics.
For sure. Okay, so we've got this big global empire idea, but let's focus on the Kingdom of David specifically.
Yeah.
What do we know from their website?
Well, their mission statement, it's all about providing an alternative world system based on righteousness, justice, security, freedom, and prosperity.
Ambitious.
Definitely.
And they're not shying away from controversial stuff. They talk about, like, bypassing the ballot box altogether. You just get citizenship directly from the empire.
Yeah, that's a pretty radical departure from how we usually think about citizenship. It raises questions about, how representation would work, how individual rights are protected.
It's like they're saying, forget the old ways, we're building a new world order.
Pretty much. They've also got this section on their website called Kingdom News, where they highlight people who've, joined their movement. And there's mention of the Legion of Zion and the Empire of David Master Plan.
Okay, getting a little cryptic now.
Yeah.
What are these groups? What are their goals? It feels like we're just scratching the surface here.
We are. It's this mix of utopian ideals, bold statements, and a movement that seems pretty organized and operating globally.
Lot to unpack. So where do we go from here?
Well, in the next part of our deep dive, we're going to dig deeper into the structure of the Kingdom of David, their leadership, and try to figure out what their plans are for the future. It gets really interesting.
All right, so we're back, diving deeper into this Kingdom of David. Last time we were talking global empires, utopian ideals, pretty heady stuff.
It was a lot to take in.
It was. But now let's get into the details. Who are these people? Where do they operate? What's their plan?
Well, that's where things get a little fuzzy. Their website, it doesn't exactly give you an org chart,
No clear lines of succession or anything.
Right. But there are some clues we can pick up on.
Okay, lay it on me. What have you found?
One name keeps popping up, Yusuf Yomtov. He's described as, a stateless refugee who immigrated to Jerusalem.
Stateless refugee.
Yeah, it's interesting, right?
Leading a movement for a global empire. That's quite the story.
It is, and he's very, very vocal about his belief that, democracy is a failed system, and that a worldwide empire under King David is the solution. World peace, harmony, all that.
So, charismatic leader, big vision. But a movement's got to be more than just one person, right?
Right.
What about the structure of the Kingdom of David itself?
Well, their website mentions a Legion of Zion, but what exactly that is, it's not totally clear.
Ooh, Legion of Zion. Sounds kind of ominous, doesn't it?
A little bit, yeah. It could be dedicated followers, an inner circle, or maybe even something more structured.
Structured? Like how? Like a secret society. Shadowy figures in smoke-filled rooms.
Maybe. They also have something called the Empire of David Master Plan.
Master Plan. Okay, now we're talking.
Again, details are pretty scarce, but it does suggest they have some kind of strategic roadmap, for achieving their goals. They're not just idealists with a website. They're thinking long-term.
All right, so there's a hierarchy, a plan, maybe even some secrecy.
Mm-hmm.
What about their geographic reach? Global empire is one thing, but where are they actually operating?
Well, they claim a global presence, and their website, it features people from all over, people who have seemingly aligned with their movement. We see profiles from the U.S., Morocco, even people in Africa.
And that Hebrew headline on their website, that suggests a presence in Israel, too.
Oh, definitely.
There's even a section about, citizenship for African refugees in Israel, so they're actively building a network, like a modern-day diaspora almost.
That's a good way to put it. And they're not just relying on the website, to get the word out. They've got Kingdom News articles featuring individuals who've, signed up.
Right. It's like a mix of testimonials and, let's be honest, propaganda.
A bit of both, yeah. They're building a sense of community, showing off the diversity of their supporters.
Look, people from all walks of life are joining us.
Exactly. But let's not forget some of their more radical ideas, like bypassing elections and getting citizenship straight from the empire. How does that square with all the talk about human rights and equality?
Yeah, that's a big contradiction, right?
It is. Makes you wonder about how power would actually work in their system, how individual rights would be protected.
It's definitely at odds with, the democratic ideals of representation and accountability.
For sure. It really challenges our basic assumptions about how governments should function.
So we've got these utopian ideals, these bold claims, and a movement that seems pretty organized, global in its reach. Where do we even go from here?
Well, in the final part of our deep dive, we'll try to tackle the big question. What would a world under the Kingdom of David actually look like? What are the potential benefits? And what are the risks? It's going to be interesting.
All right, welcome back, everyone, for the final part of our deep dive into the Kingdom of David. We've gone through their arguments, looked at their structure, their leadership, even their global ambitions.
A lot to process.
It is. But now for the big question. What would a world under their rule actually look like?
It's easy to get caught up in the big ideas, but let's try to bring it down to earth. What would this mean for, everyday life?
Right. Global empires are one thing, but how would this affect, like, you and me, regular people?
Well, according to them, it'd be a world without war, nations working together to solve, like, poverty, climate change, disease, a world of unity, justice, prosperity. At least that's the picture they paint.
Sounds pretty utopian, like something out of, I don't know, a Star Trek episode. But how do you actually get that kind of cooperation? Countries have been fighting forever, it seems like.
Their idea is to align nations under this common banner, suggesting a system where individual countries, they give up some of their power to a global body.
So no more independent nations, just one big global government.
That's the implication, yeah. It's a huge change. Would people even accept that?
It makes you think, what happens to, like, individual freedoms, cultural identity? Do we all become citizens of the world? Or are there still, like, distinct cultures and nationalities?
Lots of questions there. And then there's the question of, who's in charge of this global government? Is it the monarch, the King David figure? It's not crystal clear. They suggest the monarch provides, like, guidance, leadership, but they also mention councils, advisors.
So for a mix of monarchy and some sort of global democracy.
Maybe. It's definitely unlike any system we have now, which is, part of what makes it so interesting, and maybe a little unnerving.
Unnerving is a good word. Because doesn't this raise the risk of, like, abuse of power? So much authority in one place, it could lead to tyranny, right?
Absolutely. It's a huge concern. And it's something they don't really address. Like, what's to stop this global government from becoming oppressive?
Exactly. And what about the economics of all this? They talk about prosperity, but how would that even work? Global currency, redistribution of wealth.
Those are the million-dollar questions. And unfortunately, the source material, it's more about the big vision than the nuts and bolts.
It all feels very theoretical, very high level. It's easy to get excited about a perfect world, but reality tends to be, well, messier.
It does. So many factors. Cultures, economies, history. Hard to imagine any system that could perfectly address it all.
Makes you wonder if they've really thought it through. All the consequences, good and bad.
Right.
Well, listeners, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the Kingdom of David. We've looked at their claims, their structure, their leadership, their vision for the world.
It's been a journey.
It has. And like any good deep dive, we're coming up with more questions than answers.
Which is how it should be.
Right. We've uncovered some fascinating stuff, but it's up to each of you to decide what you think about it all.
Is their vision compelling or concerning? Could this be a path to a better future or a dangerous step toward something much worse?
Those are the questions to ponder. And we encourage you to keep digging, keep questioning, keep exploring these ideas for yourselves. This is just the beginning of your own deep dive into the Kingdom of David. Until next time, keep your minds open and stay curious.